Donald Trump being Donald Trump means that Donald Trump will want to set the record for government shutdowns, even if his shutdown is only a partial shutdown of government departments and agencies that have not already been fully funded for the year by Congress. And to set that record, Donald Trump has to keep the shutdown going until Saturday, which will be the 22nd day of the Trump shutdown. The shutdown that Donald Trump told Democrats he would never blame them for because he would take full responsibility for the shutdown. President Trump has scheduled a trip to the southern border on Thursday with the full expectation and probably the desire that the shutdown is still a shutdown. But the big problem looming for President Trump and Republicans in Congress, if they do set a record with this shutdown, is that 800,000 federal workers will miss their first payday on Friday. Federal workers get their paychecks twice a month, and Friday is their first payday of the shutdown. In government shutdowns, non-essential workers are not allowed to report for work because it is illegal for the government to force them to work for no pay. But the government is forcing TSA agents to do that because their work is considered essential. There have been multiple reports of TSA agents calling in sick, in effect, refusing to work for no pay. Joining our discussion now, David Frum, senior editor for The Atlantic, and Jason Johnson is back with us. And David, this shutdown, as it approaches the first missing payday on Friday, is already seeing reports of increasing defections among House Republicans. Political report tonight indicating easily as many as 25 could vote for the bill if Nancy Pelosi brings it back up.
Well, Jason said in the last segment, I mean, what the president must now be looking for is an exit, some kind of face-saving exit, some way that he can blame this on somebody else. And one of the things that Republicans in Congress need to be very careful of is that they will do in a pinch. The president would prefer to blame Democrats, but he's ready to blame them. If this national emergency project is exposed as illegal, it doesn't have to work. It just has to create enough of a facade that the president can later say, I was ready to fight to the end, but Mitch McConnell, he sold out, and move the blame to him.
And Jason Johnson, maybe the national emergency ploy that he tries it would immediately be stopped by federal courts. Right. Maybe that's his way out, saying, as David's saying, he's got to find a thing where he says, I tried and someone else stopped me.
Well, one thing that we know about Donald Trump, Lawrence, is he never lacks for people to blame. It could be the Democrats, it could be the liberals on the court, even if those happen to be people who are appointed by Republicans. It can be anyone that he wants to blame. I suspect at one point, once we start hearing more stories about people missing paychecks and possibly being evicted from their homes, he'll blame landowners. He'll say, hey, your landlord or et cetera, should have been more reasonable. There's never going to be a point in any of this crisis where Donald Trump will take responsibility for anything. But I think that the problem is this. At some point, he can only beat on his own party so many times. The Democrats don't care. They control the House. But at some point, the Republicans will revolt. They don't like the idea that they're going to be taking this from both sides. They're getting angry calls from their constituents, and they're going to get angry calls from President Trump. That's not going to work, and he's going to destroy whatever kind of loyalty he still has.
And here's a pressure, that's going to be on Republicans because the money, I mean, if this thing goes, this crazy scheme does somehow go forward, the president has to take his emergency funds for the wall from another military project. Right. What project would that be? Something in somebody's district. And Republicans are much more likely to have military facilities in their districts than Democrats are.
But it's my suspicion, David, just legally, that the whole thing would be shut down before $1 of the defense budget was spent in this direction, that the courts would step in and shut it down that quickly.
That, as Jason said, that gives the president then, well, these liberal judges, I would have loved to do it. I mean, he needs to look tough in his own mind, and he needs to cover his retreat because he got himself into a predicament. And remember earlier, he was saying, I want Nancy Pelosi to get me out of the predicament. Who does he think Nancy Pelosi is? His dad? That's not her job. That's his dad's job.
And, Jason, we see the president, we see Nancy Pelosi doing something that's very simple. She's just saying the word no.
Right.
That's all she's giving the president. Meantime, the president is publicly negotiating with himself in all sorts of ways, including what is this wall? Is it concrete? Is it not concrete? He publicly negotiated away concrete with himself without Nancy Pelosi saying another word.
Yeah, the president's negotiation skills are terrible. He's going to be left naked at the poker table every single time he goes up against Nancy Pelosi because she doesn't have to give him anything anymore. And in watching the president, and you said it perfectly, negotiating with himself, it's like arguing with somebody over a text message and you don't respond and they just keep going and going and going. The president keeps changing. First, the wall was brick, then it was stone, now it's styrofoam. I don't know what it's going to be made of next. At the end of the day, he's not going to get a wall. And something that I think is important to think about, not just with Republicans not wanting to be blamed by the president and getting calls from their constituents, you got to look at Republicans who have seats on the border. They know, they saw this during the Bush administration when a fence was built. The kind of lawsuits that are going to come from trying to build this wall, the eminent domain fights. You thought the Bundy Ranch was bad? You will have an absolute revolution at the border if the president tries to get this done. And Republicans in Texas, in Arizona, they know that. And they're privately probably trying to tell the president, or at least Mitch McConnell, you got to get him away from this. We can't take this kind of fight.
And David, the problems are more than Donald Trump ever imagined. Normally, as we understand it, in a shutdown like this, the Internal Revenue Service is not allowed to process tax returns and mail out refund checks. And so the Trump administration apparently has been trying to figure out, how do we mail out the refund checks even though we have a shutdown? And there's no agency of government more condemned as non-essential than the IRS by Donald Trump and Republicans generally, and so they would have to deem all IRS workers essential, bring them all back to work, and somehow get them working on refunds.
And he's going to have a problem, by the way, an immigration problem, which is, look, the immigration surge that has bothered the president and a lot of the president's supporters are these tens of thousands of Central American border crossers who seek asylum, who present themselves at the U.S. border and say, I want to be released into the country pending a hearing, and I'm coming with a minor, so I can't be detained. That problem won't change, because what the wall does not do is change the rules about asylum. The border crossers, the Central Americans, don't come at deserted places. What they want to do is turn themselves into an authority to get their asylum hearing that they maybe will never show up for. So they're going to, even if there's a wall, assuming the wall has a gate of some kind and crossings, that's where the border crossers are going to go. And the whole asylum problem will reproduce itself just encased in a lot of expensive concrete.
David Frum, Jason Johnson, thank you for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.